Hey everyone, welcome to the Kubeflow community meeting for the 11th and 12th of January 2022. We're going to talk about a bunch of things, but Kubeflow 1.5 release is coming up, so we're going to talk about that and things related. There's a bunch of proposals that I've kind of just chucked in here from the last things that we were delaying from last year that just kind of pull back in here just to raise everyone's attention. And yeah, but the main thing's the 1.5 release, so we can go through those later. So Josh was at the release team meeting earlier today or yesterday. Maybe he wants to kind of overview what was decided at that meeting for 1.5. And yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe discussed in the release team meeting is perceiving the need to delay the feature freeze for a couple weeks. So currently, I believe it was scheduled for the 13th. And the proposal was to push it back potentially to the 25th or the 27th, 25th being a Tuesday, the 27th being 2 Thursdays later. So the reasons for that, as some people had recognized, our feature freeze date was fairly close to the Christmas holiday, and some of the teams needed more time to finish up their work, and it was more than one team that had requested a little extension of time. So we discussed this, and we thought it made sense to provide the extension. We talked about 1 week. Then we talked about maybe we could do it 12 days, which would be a Tuesday rather than a Thursday. And then we talked about making a full 2 weeks on the subsequent Thursday. I think Kimonis probably is suggesting now that we just go for the full 2 weeks and make it the, what is that? I think the Thursday is the 27th, maybe. I'm not looking at my calendar, but I think that's about right. But we wanted to, put it out there, have people comment on it. If you feel we should pull it forward or push it back for any reason, now's the time to comment. But the other kind of large topic there, besides the delay, was really around which version of Kubernetes that we should be testing with. And there's an obvious desire for some folks to want 122, but we don't believe that's a stretch goal, and we probably would not call that what we want to be testing the release for what we would call stable version of 1.5. I think that there was discussion around maybe Kubernetes 119 or 120. We were looking at like what GKE uses for their stable version and what AWS is using for their stable version of GKE and EKS respectively. And we thought those might be give us some idea of what we should test with. Beyond the Kubernetes version, there's also which Istio version and Cert Manager and some of the other lower level dependencies. So there's some coordination here that we need to talk about, and we need to figure out a process to make the proposal of, what these dependencies will be, because the working groups will have certain versions that they're testing with, but the distributions and they may have different versions that they want to put out into the and support. And I think the community needs to decide what we're going to test with, and then what's our comment on things that are newer than that. So if we do 120 and people want to test with 121 or 122 or put it out with 121 or 122, what's our support policy there? And then the opposite is true too. If we put it out with, let's say 120 and people want to use 119, 118, what is going to be our support policy for the older versions of dependencies?
Well, my thought pretty much is that that's a distribution thing, right? As long as we're not breaking it with the actual core components of Kubeflow, which really doesn't make a lot of sense because there's not any actual Kubernetes code. Well, much, there's a little bit in the core components from the work from like those profile manager and stuff. But beyond that, it really shouldn't matter too much, but the community's open source manifest should decide on a version, yes. But for the distributions, they should be able to run on nearly any version of Kubeflow. Oh, Kubernetes. Sorry. Like,
I tend to agree with your statement there, Matthew. Is I think that the manifest or the release team should pick a version of Kubernetes and the dependencies, socialize it, say this is what we're going to test with, make sure that the working groups feel comfortable with that. Also make sure that the distribution owners can live with it, and then just go and test in that environment and give people a starting place.
yeah, I think I think the thing we need to be is not opinionated except on a minimum version potentially. Like that's probably the most important, more likely thing to not break anything. So we say you need to be at least 119, you know, and then nothing else. We don't really make any statements other than that, you know. And then the distributions can release 2 completely different versions for 122 and after if they need, you know, like.
Any other comments on that folks would like to provide back to the working group? Or to the release team, excuse me. Andre, I see you're on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks good to me. Only one question I have here, how we will be synchronized across the Kubernetes version, across the different components, right? Because the problem is like we still cannot be confident if all of the components will support the same version of Kubernetes, all of the Kubeflow component.
That sounds like a governance thing, like for the project as a whole, where we have maybe the project steering group puts out a notice that the minimum version that you must support is this every couple months or whatever. And the maximum version you need to support is this as well. Cause like, it's not that you can, I'm saying probably that's a governance thing, right? Cause that is really important. I agree. Like but the whole community needs to agree. And probably the only ones who could do that right now is the project steering group.
Yeah, but can we control it if all of the working group have a different workflow, right? So we don't have like the control over the working groups right now.
Well, no, while it's technically not under the control of the project steering group, what they can do is just say you need to support 119 and after, and you need to at least support 122, and then they can do whatever they want to achieve that. You know, that's.
I see.
And SDO version X, but SDO probably not going to be integrated with Kubeflow directly that much. But
so we have 2 of the working groups here, right? And one of the feedback that I would like to capture is how do we minimize the testing for the working groups, right? So for Andre and for James, you know, is there a release that you guys were already planning to test with? Are there a set of dependencies that you guys were thinking were already in your headlights that you are going to test against? From a Kubernetes and Istio, Cert Manager, any of that?
From Kubeflow pipelines perspective, I am planning to test the Kubernetes 1.22 version. Mm-hmm. And as a Google Cloud distribution, our release channel is also providing minimal version of like Kubernetes 1.21. So like a lot of people, they are sign up for the auto upgrade for the Kubernetes version, and then they have a few channels like stable, and then regular, and then rapid channel, and then the stable one, I think is the slowest, and it's already being on the Kubernetes 1.21. Mm-hmm. But I think it's totally fine for the community to decide that, okay, it's too difficult to make everybody to support the very new version of Kubernetes. I think I just need to know what is the kind of like the oldest one that our community is still being on, and so I can test it using that
Right.
version.
If I hear you, you are going to test with 122 but you're willing to support 121 or older, but 121 would be a preference if we had to go older than 122. Is that kind of what I heard?
Yes.
I
And
think he just wants
for the-
bounds. He just wants to know bounds, right?
Right.
yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, James.
Yeah, I think if we can support 1.21, that would be awesome. But if we are not able, then I'm not kind of like enforcing everybody to try to achieve that goal. So for Kubeflow pipelines, I have confirmed that we are working with the 1.22. So we should be good there.
And is there any Istio or any other type of sub dependency that you have any concern about, or?
That I think is mostly regarding the distribution.
Yeah.
Currently, like Google Cloud is using Istio 1.9, but I haven't checked with the latest version yet. So I don't know. I will follow up later.
I think as a community, we probably, if there is very few places where Istio is actually in the non-distribution code, the only place that I can think of is the notebooks working group. Oh, and KServe, but they're not really part of it anymore. So,
All I'm trying to do is, like, if we can have more multiple testing, we found that that's done better, and it just test at the working group level, test in the integrated test level with the manifest, but I get it. What about CatTib? Andre, do you have a preference of Kubernetes versions?
Yeah, as we mentioned, like in the presentation before, for CatTib and for training, we support 1.22 because we're not using like Istio or any sort of other dependencies. I think with Cert Manager, we also have a PR to updating the version to the latest, to the V1. From my understanding, in the new version of Kubeflow, we're going to use the latest version of Cert Manager, right?
Well, again, that's not quite a sensible statement though, because Kubeflow doesn't have Cert Manager in it. Distributions have Cert Manager in it.
Okay. So, but by default, the manifest working group, they're preparing the bundle, right?
Sure.
With the Cert Manager. Sure,
yeah. But you, as a distribution owner, you can do anything. You know what I mean? That's the point.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah. But from my understanding, like, we still should be responsible as a community to provide at least the bundle, like the pure Kubernetes installation with the working version, right, of Cert Manager.
Well, in my mind, the manifests are there as a convenience for distribution owners. That's kind of my thought process there.
Okay.
This was originally formed as, with the very intention that it's not a distribution, but it's a starting point for other distributions. That's kind of, and so yeah, it would make sense if you don't want to do a lot of extra work as an owner that you should follow what they're doing. But
Yeah, but in any case, like Josh, you can mention that for training and AutoML, we supporting 1.22.
Oh, for training as well.
And there was some changes in 122 that broke older APIs. Do you still support 119?
I'm not quite sure, but I think yeah, there are some breaking changes there.
Because I know a lot of people are still on 119 in terms of globally speaking. I'd say the most common versions would be 19, 20, 21, somewhere in those sort of three.
Actually, I think our AWS infrastructure using 1.19, so I can double check on that.
Yeah. Some even older, but we don't need to support them. That's crazy.
So I think I may go back to propose to the release team that they open an issue or some form of tracking way to put out what they think the dependency should be, and then get the responses back, and then make a decision and communicate it on the release on the Kubernetes version in particular. But it sounds like 122, a lot of folks want to use. I don't think the whole community is ready for 122 is the problem. I don't think all the working groups are.
if you think about it this way, we should probably, if that's the case, we should delay 1.5 until we are able to, because 1.5's life cycle of existence will be well into where 122 is the default version on all major cloud vendors.
It's a good proposal. I think we should take it back to the release team and have them discuss it and look at the evaluation of what the impacts would be both ways. But I understand what you're saying. I think it's a very good point.
Yeah, because it would be kind of scary otherwise, because people will upgrade and then not realize that 122 isn't supported, you know, and suddenly it will break when they do the upgrade, you know. Anyway, that's just thoughts. Cool. Let's so there's a couple of things that the release team wanted last time. Correct me if I'm wrong, if these have been solved, but they're not closed, so the issues were still open. The versions, someone wanted to ask the versions that were in each working group for 1.5, you know, the versions of each app, and not everyone's responded. So
yeah, who's missing at this point?
everyone except pipelines and notebooks.
I thought pipeline said 1.8.
No, everyone except, sorry, no, everyone except.
Oh, everyone has not. So
Yeah.
AutoML and training operator, we've asked this, Andre, and gotten your numbers before, but there is a tracking issue. And if you could just put your 0.113 right for
Yeah, as I said to the release meeting before on Monday, that we're having our meeting tomorrow.
Yep.
So we're going to finalize the version for training and KDP, and I will just comment on the issue tomorrow.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So everyone else as well, please comment once you're finalized. Again, this can change. If we decide to significantly delay, there may be a reason to change your version. We understand. Okay. I just noted that there was a change I've seen that people just might want to be aware of, which is that 1.8, which is the version of 1.8 of Kubeflow pipelines, will be defaulting to a different executor, which is Emissary. Does anyone here want to just quickly comment that?
Yeah, so basically for Kubernetes 1.19 or above, people will have to manually change the config map to use Emissary executor instead of Docker executor. Otherwise, any KFP pipeline cannot run. So I think people are using newer version of Kubernetes have already been aware of this Emissary executor. What we are changing in this KFP 1.8 release is just to save people from manually doing that. So if you deploy a new KFP deployment, you don't need to manually change the config map anymore. And then we are defaulting to Emissary executor. So your pipeline should work directly.
There's a bit of danger there because people might be running old versions of Argo workflows though, which didn't, it's like PNS was the one that I think a lot of people were using, but I agree, Emissary is a better executor, no question. But I just think that we just need to make sure we communicate this very clearly in whatever changelog upgrade, whatever, you know?
Right, I have already updated the Kubeflow website.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Message. Yeah, I sent out a message to the Slack channel. I sent out an email to Kubeflow Discuss Google Groups, and I'm also speaking of it right now in the community meeting. And also for people who are upgrading to Emissary, or kind of like if you are using PNS or any other things, like it doesn't stop you from using those executor, but only when you are installing new Kubeflow pipeline deployment, we are deploying to Emissary. So if you are using PNS, feel free to continue using PNS because you have to manually change the executor to PNS anyway. So the workflow for PNS user doesn't change. And also for Argo workflow, KFP actually determine the Argo workflow version in our dependency. So KFP is currently dependent on Argo workflow 3.2.3. The patch version might not be correct, but basically 3.2. And Argo Flow is planning to make the emissary executor as the default executor in their distribution in 3.3. So which is one minor version above our current dependency. We hope that will happen, but probably it won't match our Kubeflow 1.5 timeline. So we are taking a step ahead to make the emissary executor as the default in the KFP deployment. But hopefully, like when Argo Flow release the new minor version, we will switch to use the new Argo Flow version.
Cool. We should probably, for the same reasons like we do with Istio, we should probably define bounds of which Argo versions you support, because people.
Actually, each KFP has a defined Argo version that we depends on. So what you can do is actually go to KFP GitHub repo, find the release tag for your version, and then you can see the Argo dependency over there if you really care.
Yeah, I know, but some people might be doing, I know it's not the best practice, but you could theoretically be using Argo workflows and Kubeflow separately as well on the same cluster. That's all.
Oh, okay. In that case, then probably we can consider adding a compatibility table saying that, okay, KFP 1.8 depends on Argo workflow 3.2, and then people have a clear mind of like which one they are depending on. But from my understanding, we actually repackage Argo workflow.
It is still a cluster-wide install though, because it installs CRDs. But yeah.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah, because like Argo workflows, the main thing it does is install CRDs, and those do change between versions. I'm not saying it's a thing that we need to solve. We just need to decide if we're solving it. I
see. I think you're right. Like the cluster scoped resource probably needs to be unique. I don't know because I haven't seen people filing complaint about that yet. But if people do, then I think we should prioritize kind of like
I think it's more like it's a matter of time until Argo releases a version that people upgrade to that breaks our stuff, you know? Like that's inevitable. That's what I'm meaning.
That's true. But I think that probably like can be handled once we have faced this scenario. But I haven't seen that. Have you seen any complaint about that?
Well, it happened between 2 and 3, but that was unrelated. That again, Kubeflow is in a really interesting place right now, but I think it's very, people who are using it are quite advanced. So they're probably quite capable of fixing these sort of problems. But, you know, if we want to encourage less advanced users to be able to use the platform, you know, that's what I'm saying.
I see. Yeah, I think it makes sense to try to document our dependency. Yeah.
Yep.
Probably
cool.
First update documentation first. Yeah.
Cool. Now there's one thing, I don't know if this was in your meeting, Josh, but 8 days ago, there was a proposal for a liaison to be added to the release team for each working group.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we followed up on that. I can't remember, Andre, you were there, but I can't remember that we assigned the liaison. I know Dominic was working as the kind of the overall, but I forget if we made specific single liaisons to every working group. I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, the comment that Jan was mentioning is very good, which is that we should make sure that we're, you know, picking people who are useful and not maybe even not necessarily already in the release team. But yeah, that's whatever. Cool. Just wanted to highlight that. Now, okay, there's a bunch of stuff I'm going to blast through really quickly just for the people who have admin permission on the org, so they can, if they, I'll highlight the one I want people to look at next, but I'm always kind of making PRs that fix various things across the org. And one of the main ones right now is, actually, well, no, actually, I'll come back to the owners file cleanup. We'll start with, yeah, we'll do this one first. Okay, let's start with, I'll do this at the end. Okay, this is actually the most important thing, which is, originally, we were planning to remove distribution-owned documentation from kubeflow.org. I kind of tentatively put last year as February 1st as the date. I still think we should try and hit that. That's, you know, 20 days from now. It's not that hard to move your docs somewhere else, either to your GitHub repo or to wherever you're hosting your thing. If someone, what I want to do, so I think we should aim to do this still, which means we delete the docs and put redirects into wherever you say your docs are now living on the website. So what we're talking about here is kubeflow.org. Whenever that loads, documentation, distributions, this page here will disappear, this whole section here. And the only place you'll learn about distributions will be on the installing Kubeflow page. And this is where you'll get information about it, because it's kind of weird that we're hosting people's docs. And that's what we agreed a long time ago now, but we've only started implementing it now. So I just wanted to bring attention to everyone to this, that we should be planning to do this on this date. And if people can't make that date, please make a good case for it, and then we can think about another date. But I really want to have this done before 1.5, because it's just a big mess that so many people's docs are on our website. Yeah. So only one distribution is currently, well, there's other distributions that are not listed under installing, but the ones which are listed under installing, only one of them uses offsite docs. So anyway, if you own a distribution, please take a look at this. I'll tag everyone again to ping everyone about this, but I think we should. So if you have problems, please, about that timeline, please message in there. Cool.
I want to kind of like chime in a little bit. Yeah, I'm sorry that I'm probably won't be able to make it in the time that you propose, because I'm working on the Kubeflow pipeline release. I'm also working on the Kubeflow on Google Cloud distribution release. And I probably will need the documentation ready with me when I'm preparing for the Kubeflow 1.5. And then if we add one more, which is moving the documentation, that probably will be too much on my side. So it's just a personal ask if we can give it more time. Yeah. And then another thing is I actually consult with internal Google as well, but we don't like using the GitHub to host our documentation. But we are still trying to find a destination for hosting our documentation.
I mean, obviously, we're not saying use GitHub. I'm just saying that one of the options, especially for the open source ones, is that you should maybe use GitHub.
You're right. You're right. Like I proposed a few, but still haven't got a defined solution yet. So yeah, we are still discussing, but I'm pushing this forward. It's just like based on the observation I have, we probably will need more time to find a destination. Yeah.
So that's cool. So if we can get an example of how long you think that will take, please comment it in there, and then we can update the time. I'm trying to just push a date, because as soon as you set a date, people will actually work out if they can do it within that time. You know, that's kind of the.
Yeah, let me try to find that time first. Okay.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. Yep. So now there's another proposal I have, which is something that we can work on over the next 6 months, probably. It's not for today, tomorrow, but something we should start working on is that the owners files across the whole org are a mess. They contain people who haven't been involved in the project for years in some cases. They also violate almost all of the current agreed standards of the owners. And as a result are somewhat of a security risk. Effectively, this under our own kind of agreed definition of maintaining owners, which is both on kubeflow.org and in the community repo. This is what it says, you know, read these things, but effectively there's 4 problems that I've listed out. Either the owners are not actively involved in the community anymore, that the owners are the same as approvers, are the same as reviewers, that there are more approvers than reviewers. In some cases, there are 0 reviewers, and that some owners are really inactive. And so all of these are listed in our sort of charter, if you want to call it that, as being warning signs and problems. And so what I'm trying to do here is list that these are the problems. And then I've got a proposed solution, which is for everyone to kind of review. And this is, again, we're not going to do this over the next month. It'll be a couple months process, but it will make the community a lot healthier, I think, once we do this, which is start off first. So there's 4 different issues we listed here. The solution for each of them. First solution is remove inactive owners. Pretty easy. I think a very minimal definition is, have they done something in the last year, right? If they can't meet that criteria, they're not active. for people who are important to the project, there's this concept called an emeritus approver, which does not have the power to approve, but is listed in the owners file for reference for future people, which is what Kubernetes does. For solution 2, we need to pretty much create new approvers where there's not enough of them. And there's kind of a process to do this, which is look for people who have done it, been contributing to the project, start them off as reviewers and promote them to approvers. That's the whole process we all agreed to originally and what Kubernetes does. And that's the same there. And so in certain cases though, just for problems 3 and 4, mostly 4, is that some owners files are inactive because the actual project is not maintained anymore, part of Kubeflow. So in this case, we need to find new owners for that by either reaching out to the community or depreciating that part of Kubeflow. So yeah, so this is kind of just it's a big project. It's going to take a long time, but I think now that we're past the holidays, we can start kind of seriously making some steps towards this, because this will make the project easier to join. If you're a contributor, you can join in more easily if you know that there's a pathway to becoming an approver. And obviously we don't want unmaintained parts of Kubeflow. That's bad. Anyway, that's just what I wanted to highlight there. If anyone has comments, please make them on this rather than raising them now. We don't have a lot of time. No, anyway, does anyone want, actually, we'll give everyone 2 seconds to comment there if anyone has any objections to that.
I don't have an objection. I think what you've laid out is good. I think we should try to put bite-sized chunk and lay out a timeline for some of these bite-sized chunks to be worked on. You know, the approvers seem to be mapping up to the working groups somewhat.
In some cases, yes, but in other cases, they're just a mess. Like it's real. Like I've listed out all the owners that are particularly problematic here across the whole org, and specified which of these issues they suffer from. But it's not. So it's not a lot. See, there's not a whole lot here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But the difficulty is finding people who are willing to, because again, we want being in the owners file to be a commitment. It's that you are maintaining this project. And if you're not maintaining it, then you shouldn't be in the owners file. That's kind of or you could be an emeritus owner, but like that's the whole, it's a privilege to be there and it should be treated as such.
Well, I appreciate you doing this. I think this is a nice job and a nice proposal, and I think we should try to work towards it, like you said.
Yeah, it's not very controversial. It's just, you know, it's just something that takes time and work, and I know it's going to be painful to do, but we'll get there. Cool. Last thing I wanted to go through is just blast through these PRs. The main one I want, and I see that I think James has already gone through it. There was only one major PR remaining on the website, which was this, and I think someone has, yeah, James has gone through these. Did you want to make any comments on this? Or so if I address these issues, is this a good PR for you, James?
Yeah, I think it's good to kind of like create separate commits instead of like merging everything, because I want to compare the past approved PR with these new changes, but looks like the commit is currently merged into one, so I have to review it again. Like
yeah, that's, I understand, and I'm sorry for doing that. I was just like, after time away from it, I came back to it and was like, this is unreadable, the current state. And so I was like, I just don't even feel comfortable doing this. So I just kind of redid it. And I think the current solution is a lot easier. Where is it? To read now, and it's in this state. But you can see from if you want to see how different it is, you can see the old page as well here. In the photo.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Thank you for like pasting the snapshot between these two. Yeah, I think if you can adjust the current comments, I will continue reviewing it, because at some point when I kind of put too many comments, I will stop, and then not to overload you with a lot of comments, and then once you resolve that, we can, yeah.
And I'm happy for you to just kind of blast through comments, and then we can address them all. Of course, if the comments are all like the same thing, it's a bit hard to do. It's a bit pointless, because if we come to a different conclusion, then it's difficult, waste of your time.
Because once you make the changes, and I can review based on your changes, right? So because that might be different. Where I
won't squash the commit, if that's what you're asking. I only squashed this one so that it could be a kind of a start again.
You're
No,
going
he
to
said-
squash again?
No, I won't
or-
squash. That's what I'm saying. I'll put
Okay.
another commit. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, that sounds good then.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, maybe we can like focus on addressing the current comment.
Cool. So I just realized we talked about that first, so I'll move that one down. Ooh, is that okay? Cool. Oh my lord.
One comment on this, and I appreciate working group lead and Matthew, you doing the work there. We may want to ask from the user community, a user to review the docs and see if they understand them.
Oh yeah.
So when we get a near final is just, I think we should do a sanity check, whatever we want to call that, because that seems like if it's the most, it's the most used component of Kubeflow. And I think it's critical that we,
Oh, this is just one page. We already did the refactor of the docs. If you look under the,
yeah.
This was done a while ago, but it's the comments I've heard of people have liked this refactor. There's still work to do, no question. But this refactor where it's now actually structured in some semblance of a sane way is so much easier to browse. But definitely, for example, we should be going through each of the pages because I just restructured them. I didn't reword them and just confirming that these should still exist and things like that.
Okay.
So yes, I would agree. But there's so many docs that asking someone to do that without paying them is going to be quite hard, you know?
Okay, I'll make an effort if this one's open, when we're ready for an end user to review it, I'll make an effort to find someone.
Or even a couple, it might be good to have diversity of experience,
Oh, yeah.
someone who's really advanced, things like that. And someone
Yes.
who's not.
Perfect.
Cool. And then the other one is just a very simple PR that was just upgrading the robots.txt and also fixing up a git ignore. But yeah, so that's another option if you just want a quick one to merge. Like these files don't matter anymore, and having them in there is a bit dangerous because they're doing things to the git config that shouldn't be doing. And this is in the website repo. Anyway, that's just one to highlight. And now the other ones, now this is another change that it will take a bit of time, but we need to do this cleanup. I've made the PRs already. It's just reviewing them. So this one is in the internal ACLs, which control all the configs of auth for the GitHub org. The file is a mess. Like it's not quite as bad as the owners, but it needed a lot of work. So there's two things. I've split it into 3 different PRs here. One is just the most pressing issue is that currently, while most of the notebook leads do have access through other methods, the actual being in a notebook lead does not give you the access to the repo that you need to be a notebook lead. So this is a very simple one-line internal ACL change, which says if you're a notebook lead, you can write on the Kubeflow repo. So this means the ability to create branches, the ability to tag releases, and other things like that. And I know it's inconvenient that Kubeflow/Kubeflow is where the Kubeflow notebooks working group works from, but there's no other real option. Like, unless we take the time to move it, in which case that's going to take time. Right now, only one member of our team can actually create branches, which is Kimonos because he's in the release leads. This is more of a question for Jan and James, I'd say.
I think Kimonas is aware of this request from the previous community meeting, but he is a little bit confused about what we are actually trying to achieve. Because currently looks like the notebook team is working fine without this permission. So I think Kimonas take the action item to.
So this is you that has to decide this. He can't decide this. This is in the internal ACLs repo.
I know. Like I can approve it, but the thing is, like, does notebook leads need this? Right?
No, not for releasing, just for development. Like this is the bigger issue. And if what we're saying is there are too many notebook leads, that's probably the case. But the issue is that we need to trust notebook leads to be able to manage their own software. Otherwise, and at the moment you can see that by how few commits and other things are going on in the notebook repo. It's genuinely very hard for us to manage releases in a sensible way. Like we can't No, it's not just release, it's just development. Like we can't even configure our bots like on the repo.
Like, but is that a problem right now? Like for development, is that the case?
Well, the issue is stuff like, we've had a bot that we've been waiting for someone who has admin on the org to configure for like 7 months or 10 months or something, which is to do like the the dependency updating bot. Anyway, the point is, it's like there are definitely issues, and it's just, this is the only working group that currently does not have write access to their own repo. And I know that that's because it's Kubeflow, but for better or for worse, that is where the code lives. And if we don't trust the leads to manage their own repo, then we need to either remove the leads we don't trust, or we need to, I don't know, that's what we'd have to do, yeah. Remove the leads we don't trust.
Let's roll back a little bit before we make the decision of like this, like either or. The thing is, like, probably you shouldn't have permission to add bot unless the PSG or kind of like the Kubeflow org lead help you to do that. I remember Andrew asked me to add the bot for him previously. So I think if you want to add a bot, then you should request to add a bot.
Well, not adding a bot, but configuring bots, managing branches, tags, and releases. It's what I'm saying is every other working group currently has write access on their repo. The notebooks working group does not.
Are we currently releasing on the Kubeflow branches for notebooks?
Yes, and this is the problem. In fact, and we're in a really kind of bad state because of it. So like, because it's so arduous to do this, like things like we can't have branches for each release, because really what we actually would need is a branch for each subcomponent's release. Because right now we release every component all at once, which is kind of weird. Because these are not related. A notebook controller is not related to the KFAM API or the central dashboard.
But they're all managed by notebook working group, right?
Everything in the component in the Kubeflow repo is owned by notebooks working group. I agree that I would love it to not be the case, but some of these components are core Kubeflow in some sense, right? Access management, KFAM, central dashboard, profile controller. These are like Kubeflow. So it makes sense for them to live in this repo, but maybe notebooks not, but that's a separate discussion. But for now, the owners of notebooks is the same people as the owners of central dashboard. So it's not a huge risk to have both. The risk is that it's the Kubeflow repo, which is the most visible repo. But we already have write access to the majority of the repo, just not the root.
Oh, okay. But like we can make release right now, like this 1.4. Kubeflow 1.4.
We can make a 1.5 release, but that's
right.
Only one person can do it. And it's not just that, it's like, it's just weird that we don't have write access to our own repo to do things like cleaning up files like these that aren't even used anymore.
I see. But that looks like, yeah, I think there's some awkward kind of like boundary between the kind of like notebook working group owned component versus the whole Kubeflow repository. But like if it's not blocking you right now, probably we can continue using the current setup. Or if we can find a way to like distinguish them, like the permission between notebook working group owned component versus the Kubeflow repo, then I think that will be the one to go. But before we find a solution, I would hesitate to make that call right now.
That things that are root to the repo, like branches and tags, are in there. It doesn't care about your owner file. It only cares about if you're write access to the repo.
Yeah, I understand. Like, I think that's because of the current organization of this repository, which I totally agree. So should we actually change the organization of this repo?
I think there should be 3 repos. I think this repo should stay. Obviously, it's the main repo with 11,000 stars, but this repo should have nothing in it. That's my opinion. It should have. We should have a repo called Kubeflow Core, which has all the pieces which are not notebooks but are core to Kubeflow. And then we have a one called Kubeflow/notebooks, just like you have Kubeflow/pipelines. And then we give whoever ends up owning the core pieces, because probably there should be a core working group, for those, rather than it all being notebooks.
I think it's like probably the notebook working group currently managing this set of component, and then like we can call it like any name, like foobar name, and then your suggestion is to make the foobar repository which can serve the notebook working group's own components.
That's one option.
Right.
We could have one repo called
Right.
Kubeflow/notebooks, but I think it's just a bit confusing for users. Anyway, this is kind of a pretty specific discussion, but my proposal is, the main proposal is that we need to have write access to some repo. I don't really care how. It's making it hard to maintain it, and create robust release processes for the like 12 apps in here. And I think the logical end state is we have 2 new repos that are created, one called notebooks, where all the notebook stuff lives, and one called core, which is where every other component in here lives, but it is not, but it is currently maintained by notebooks working group for now. Anyway, that's my proposal.
Can notebook working group make individual release for each component listed there?
They could.
You mentioned one person can do that. Yeah.
Oh, well,
I have just a request. I think this is something that the working group, the notebook working group should take and report back. And I think there's a couple other issues that we need to get to before the end of the meeting. And so we've spent a bit of time on this. I don't know that we're going to get to a resolution right now, but I think you've made a good proposal. You've highlighted the issue. Maybe
Yep. Okay. And there's no other real big ones here. So there's 2 other ones I want to highlight, but again, I just need people to have time to review them, and that may not happen until after the release 1.5, but which is this is the biggest one, which is the full cleanup of the internal ACL file. It's a massive cleanup. It didn't remove or add any person. It just cleaned it up, made it consistent with the rules at the top of the file, which say things should be sorted alphabetically. And things should not be listed in maintainers. And this is a bit of a security risk, because right now they're listed as maintainers of the group, not maintainers in the sense of maintaining the software, but of the group, meaning that someone in this group, if their account is hacked, could remove everyone else in the group. So there's no reason if it's maintained by this file, like this file is maintaining the list of who should be in it. If you're in it to be removed, you should remove from this file, not, you know what I'm saying? So like, it's just that people have accidentally used the word maintainers rather than members. And that's what it says at the top of the file. In groups should be listed as, should not be listed as maintainers, and user groups should be administered through this file. See? So that's what this does. Removes everything to members. And also gives clean names to every group, because some of the names were kind of strange, like folks from Google and things like that. So made them all consistent. Cool. That's something that if someone has a lot of time and OCD problems, they can help review. But yeah, cool. And there's also some inactive members. I have another PR for that. Anyway, so that's my last thing there. Does Peritus wants to quickly say something?
Yeah, hey, thanks for giving me the opportunity. So I joined the community meeting last week in the morning, and I requested what's the process for continuing the conversation, because I'm new to the community, and the guidance I got was to reopen it. And since I don't have permissions to reopen, I just asked if it can be reopened by anybody who has the permissions. And I want to address the comments that Tia has highlighted. That's pretty much what I'm requesting. Because what happened was before the holidays, she said she'll get back to me after the holidays, and within 10 hours closed it without giving me an opportunity to go by the recommendations and the questions that have been asked on the issue there.
In the end, Thea for now is the head of the project steering group, so does obviously have the power to veto things. If unless something changes in her mind, it's unlikely that this would ever happen. But the reason I'm requesting Matthew is she's highlighted a few things which have some circular logic. I went and extensively studied everything in Kubernetes, and I'm also working with the Kubernetes workspace admins.
So it's a little confusing, the points that you brought about. So what I'm trying to achieve here is one, an opportunity to address her feedback, and two, to fix the inconsistencies that have been pointed out, because Kubeflow by itself doesn't have a policy. It's a redirect to the Kubernetes workspace policies. And there it says CNCF requests are honored. We are already on CNCF workspace. We are an approved tool on CNCF. I can share all of that, but I want to do that in the way the community is running this group. So
yeah, so I think the reason why it will have been not accepted, and I think the reason why it's very unlikely to without a lot of work, which maybe you guys are willing to do, is that right now when people join the Kubeflow Slack, they do not agree to any privacy policy.
Yeah,
Meaning,
but unfortunately, Kubeflow also exports the entire Slack archive, which is available publicly on their own website.
Sorry, can you say it again?
So the Slack archives from Kubernetes workspace is pointed out as something which is available publicly. So because if you look at here, the redirection from Thea is to Kubernetes.
Mm-hmm.
And I read the entire policy front to back. And I have several questions because the only guidance I have is this one link.
I agree that there's definitely some lacking information here, but it's like there's, in the end, it's fine if we change the rule, but it's questionable how we would, whether or not Kubernetes is doing things right, who cares? In the end, we still have to be safe as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. So it's not documented anywhere. And also there are some inconsistencies that I want to make sure I get addressed. For example, when I join the Google groups, it doesn't ask me for any of those things as well, but it does show up on Google search results.
I imagine that you're probably agreeing, probably within the Google terms of service, you're probably doing something there. Because in this case, Google is the owner of this as well. So,
I get it. So I just want to continue the conversation and get an opportunity to address it, because I never got an opportunity. Because in 10 hours, they said it'll get back.
I agree. That was a bit harsh. That was a bit weird, but
so I was confused because I'm new to the community. So I'm looking for guidance on how to carry this conversation forward.
So my expectation of what you'll need to do is, for whether or not Kubernetes is doing it, forget about that. We probably do need a privacy policy, and giving the people the opportunity to opt out so effectively, we need to have something which says, by joining the Slack, you're doing this. And then secondarily, if that's not already the case, maybe there's somewhere that I'm missing. Mm-hmm. And then secondarily to that, if you're already on the Slack and we say we're not doing that right now, then we say, if you're already on the Slack, we need to give you an opportunity to leave. And if you haven't left by this date, like the question of the lawyers would need to say, does there need to be an explicit acceptance, or is kind of an implicit acceptance of not leaving allowed, things like that. Because obviously your privacy isn't really being violated if you're not actively contributing. And we can say, by contributing after this date, you are agreeing to the new terms, like that. So what I'm saying is that would be anything involving lawyers is complex, but B, I'm interested to hear about your tool and use your tool, but I think it will be a little bit of work on your behalf to get that to happen. And I know that that's our fault because we're not robust enough in our policies and practices to do it well. Yeah. And I think if you're saying to be able to get us as a user, you're willing to put some work in, then I'm very much for that.
Exactly. That's what I need, an opportunity to address all the feedback, and I'm willing to put the work in it to make it happen.
Yeah, and that sounds great. Obviously, James or someone else from Google might want to respond if they're still in the chat.
Maybe. Yeah, here's my request also along this line is, if we're not going to have this Paradis assistant to help us answer questions from community users that have been ignored, what are we going to do?
Well, that's a separate discussion.
Well, actually, no, because it's like we have a way to improve user satisfaction. It's being used by other communities, and we'd like to see if we can use basically machine learning on, our own problems. So look, I think that this is a new year. We need to make goals that we can shoot for in 2022. This would be one that I think we could measure and see how the Paradis Assistant either helped or didn't help customer user satisfaction. And if we're not going to do that, I'd just like to know what is the alternative, because I do believe with 225 issues or 265 issues that are open right now in just Kubeflow, that has to get better.
So I think the solution to that one, by the way, is related to the proposal I said earlier, where we can turn off issues on Kubeflow, and then instead say you have to go to one of the repos for the subcomponents. You know what I mean? Because once the components don't live on Kubeflow, then there's a separate issue tracker for the notebooks and for the core pieces. That will solve that largely. And yeah, going through all the old issues and moving them, because you can move issues between repos, will be a bit of work, but it's not that bad. But I think the first step for fixing Kubeflow's issue tracker, which is a nightmare for the notebook working group, to be clear, because it means that we don't know where our issues are. Like they're buried in the middle of these questions about Kubernetes on EKS and stuff like that. Which I'm sure you often are triaging them, Josh. I'm sure you get to experience this.
Yeah, it's not terribly hard because I just either search by notebooks or Kubeflow, but I understand what you're saying. I guess that one, I think it's fair to give the Paradis team at least a second shot because they did invest the time over at least a quarter. I think it's probably fair to walk through their request or to take another look at it at least.
No, well, the problem is still the same, that it is, I'm not a lawyer, not legal advice. It is probably not a good idea for us to use user data without them consenting, especially outside of America. Like outside of America, especially Europe, you do not want to do that. So that's all I'm saying. And there is some concerns I have about a few of the bots that are on Slack already. But again, that's what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying. All right, before we close out, I think there's some new people in the community. One thing, Matthew, both you and I, as we run these meetings, we may want to do is at the beginning of the meeting, we might want to welcome new people or give them a chance to say hello and what they're doing. So when we finish up this meeting and finish up this after Paradis, I would at least like to have a chance for new people to introduce themselves if that's possible.
Yeah, but let's not record that. So let's just close it out. Anyone got anything before we close the recording?
Okay, so just a request. So I just want to know what's the next step for me. So as I said, I'm willing to put in the work. So I just want to make sure I get an opportunity to do that.
If you so to address the main concern Thea has, which is again a legal one, that is going to be hard, no question. But I think there's a pretty clear steps towards that, which is obviously a privacy policy can be introduced. So if you're willing to help us do that, that would be amazing and amazing for the community as a whole, But there is still the fact that Google lawyers will probably have to get involved because they are taking on some risk otherwise, So that will be a bit back and forth, and that's fine. But I would love to use your tool if it's good. I don't know if it's good, but I would love to use it. And I think others would too. And if you're willing to put the work in to get that, then that's amazing. It looks good for you. It looks good for us. It solves a lot of problems. You're killing many birds with one stone.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I just want a chance to address the specific comments that Thea has posted. And I just want to make sure we keep it in line with one issue and not open another one and I keep hopping from one to another.
I will reopen it now, but I'll just, I'm going to say, anyway, I'll stop recording. Anyway, so anyone else got anything? Cool. Thank you so much for coming, guys. Been a long one today. Hopefully everyone's had a good break. Obviously I wasn't here last week, so hopefully you had a good break if you have had a break. And yeah, thanks guys.